settled in. So two old friends meet in the street. They haven't seen each other in quite a long time. We can all relate to that. So one says to the other, I'm running to catch a train, but tell me, I gotta run, but in one word, how are you doing? The other one says, great. First one says, well, that's not good enough. I mean, so many years we haven't seen each other, just one word. I mean, all right, I'm running late, but tell me in one more word, tell me in 2 words how you're doing. So the other one replies, not great. It's been that kind of year. Great, not great. On the not great side, calamity on top of calamity, threats to our safety, our freedom, particularly for women, our democracy, our privacy, all this as the planet continues to melt. Throw in Ukraine, refugees, immigration, economic insecurity, crime, racism, anti-Semitism, gun violence, hate, and let's not forget a pandemic that refuses to go away. Some have described this as a break glass moment. You know, when you pull the fire alarm, you got to break the glass. But before I pull any fire alarms, let me share a second anecdote. This one is a true story. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel was entering his class of rabbinical students at the Jewish Theological Seminary and proclaimed, I saw a miracle this morning. I saw a miracle this morning. Rabbi, his students asked him, what was the miracle? The sun came up. So today I'd like to make the case for great over not great. You know, for Jews, it just takes a single word, one word, to take a break glass moment and turn it into a break the glass moment. Just one word can turn a 5-alarm fire into a jubilant wedding dance, from break glass to break the glass. One word can change everything. Or how about just switching 2 letters? Today we begin the Hebrew year Tav Shin Pei Gimel, 5783. And the Hebrew word using Pei and Gimel, lafuk, means to disappear, to evaporate, to become numb, to grow faint, to expire. Not great. It's as if the Jewish calendar read all those polls about consumer confidence and said, do we have a year for you? Okay, but here's something about those 2 letters. If you reverse the Pei and the Gimel, you get the word gaf, or agaf, which refers to a bird's wing. Now, in the Torah, there are lots of curses, but the Bible teaches us how to turn darkness into dawn, the bitter into sweet. We can take that Pei Gimel, the 2 letters representing this year, and reverse the curse simply by reversing the letters. And in doing so, we rise from curse to blessing, from despair to hope. For if we have read our Emily Dickinson, we know that wings can take flight, and that hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. Yes, this bird sings, and she never stops singing, rain or shine, calm or tempest-tossed in a storm. It warms us, it carries us, and it croons within us. We just need to reverse the letters, and we'll find that the solution is embedded in the problem. Hope is the thing with wings. And that, in a nutshell, is my message today. We seem to be accursed everywhere we turn, but despite that, we need to look for the blessing. And the curse, without ignoring the curse can become the source of blessing, like the underbrush in a forest fire from where new saplings sprout. Where disaster strikes, where darkness seems most endemic, there are always sparks of light. To paraphrase Rebecca Solnit, the future is dark, but the darkness is as much of the womb as of the grave. Both places are dark, but in the deepest darkness, there is a future. This year, we should know that. This year, we've literally peered into black holes, and we've seen the incredible light. The new James Webb telescope, the space telescope, goes out 1 million miles and looks back 13 billion years, all the way back to the Big Bang, to creation. We're gazing forward and looking backward. It's so remarkable. Looking at the very beginnings of the universe, all the way back to let there be light. And so we have seen this constellation, Pegasus, that has 5 galaxies that appear to be touching each other, engaged in a cosmic dance. It's called Stephan's Quintet. It's first discovered over a century ago, but Webb has shown us details we never saw before. One of the 5 galaxies includes a spot that is so bright, the experts say it's from material becoming super hot as it falls into this huge, enormous black hole at the center of the galaxy. The brightest light flowing into the deepest darkness. What makes this light so bright is that it's the contrast to the darkness, as it's pulled into the void by a gravity force so great we can barely imagine it, but we can see it. We can see through the extended eye of the James Webb this incredible dance, a star raging against the dying of the light. And we see that, actually, we recognize it in our prayers, the evening prayers. Golel or mipnei choshech, v'choshech mipnei or, who rolls light from darkness and darkness from light. The Hebrew word gal means waves. So the rabbis imagined light waves many centuries before anyone spoke of electromagnetic radiation. And the word evening, ma'ariv, comes from the word for mixture. Light and darkness, always mixing, rolling dynamically in a cosmic dance. This interplay of darkness and light is also played out in the areas of history and morality, second nature to the Jew. We know all about the ebbs and flows of history. We also know that in Judaism we have the power to change things for the better, to stack the deck in favor of blessing and kindness, to shorten the ebbs and lengthen the flows. And it's incumbent upon us to try. That's how we differ from some other faiths, where acceptance of suffering is all there is. But we Jews, we endure, we persevere, we overcome the darkness. Deuteronomy states we have a choice between blessing and curse. And the Talmud says, whoever witnesses the miracle of a sunrise or a sunset and doesn't say a blessing is wasting that gift of a new day. The Webb telescope reminded us that we don't need a telescope, actually, to see miracles and to count blessings every morning, as Heschel did. The sunrise is a blessing, but only if we harness its energy and reduce our carbon footprint. Our agricultural bounty is a blessing, but only if we use it to feed the hungry. Our sexuality is a blessing, but only if we use it to ennoble and never to subjugate. Our mind is a blessing, but only if knowledge is synthesized with a yearning for justice and a predisposition for kindness. And our democracy is a blessing, if we can keep it. We believe in the ultimate victory of hope, but we need to earn it, one action at a time. The great Israeli writer Amos Oz related this parable. If you see a burning fire, you have choices. One choice is to bring a bucket of water and throw it on the fire. If you don't have a bucket, bring a glass. And if you don't have a glass, use a teaspoon. And everyone has a teaspoon. And yes, I know a teaspoon is a little thing and fire is huge, but there are millions of us, and each one of us has a teaspoon. We Jews are so committed to believing in blessing and in hope, in the triumph of hope, that our national anthem is called The Hope. Even though Hatikva sounds like Old Man River meets the Volga boatmen, and they meet at a funeral, and it always makes us cry. Lyrics are fine, but they really should have hired the Beach Boys to write the music. Really, our national anthem is bipolar. On the one hand, it concludes with a crescendo of hope for a free Jewish nation centered in Jerusalem. On the other hand, the song was written in and composed by a composer from Ukraine. Jerusalem and Ukraine. Lots happened this year in both places. Lots of blessings, and lots of curses. In both places, rays of hope have burst forth from the deepest darkness in the very same place. And I'm going to show you now. First in Jerusalem. This past summer, the oldest written text ever found in Jerusalem was revealed. It was discovered in David's city, near the Gihon Spring, just below the Temple Mount. Many of us have been there. And it's so old that it predates any Israelite presence at all. It's 33 centuries old, from a Canaanite temple, a slab carved into the bedrock. The inscription consists of 20 words and 63 letters. The oldest inscription ever found in Jerusalem, the holiest place on earth, an astounding find. And what does this inscription say? Curse the mayor. Is Mayor Simmons here, by the way? She was supposed to come. Is she not? No, I don't know. If you're here, sorry. Seriously, it's a litany of curses directed against the ruling authority of the city. Here's what it says, literally, the first written thing. Cursed, cursed, you will surely die. Cursed, cursed, you will surely die. Governor of the city, you will surely die. Cursed, you will surely die. Cursed, you will surely die. Cursed, you will surely die. And don't call me Shirley. That's it. Who knew? They had Alex Jones back then. 3,000 years. This channeling of wrath for political gain, this negativity, the anger, nothing has changed. Nothing life-affirming in this first inscription. No, we come in peace. No, proclaim liberty throughout the land. No, curses, hatred, and revenge. It hasn't changed. It's so disappointing. Can you imagine 3,000 years from now, and they'll be sifting through the remnants of our civilization, and the first example of writing they'll come across is a bumper sticker saying something about a guy named Brandon? So not great. But the ray of light, the blessing in the midst of the curse, isn't so much what this inscription says, but where it was found. Found almost in the exact spot where, within a couple of centuries, few generations, David's troops would conquer the city, near that Gihon Spring. Without that spring, there's no Jerusalem, there's no city of peace. The word Gicha in Hebrew means gushing forth, and it gushed forth 600,000 cubic meters of water a year. If you ever walked through Hezekiah's tunnel, you know how deep the water flows, how cold it is, and how dark it is. Try walking through without a flashlight. And at the end of the tunnel, they discovered another dedication, another inscription. This one not a curse, but a blessing, thanking the stonecutters for their superhuman efforts to bring up water from the bottom to the parched city. It's a very steep climb. And to save the city from the Assyrian siege. From the curse comes a blessing in the same spot. And now, to complete the circle, 33 centuries later, the Jewish state is bringing the technology of irrigation and desalination to a parched world. from a spring of curses, a wellspring of blessing. But there was an even more spectacular find revealed this year. Not in Jerusalem, but up in Samaria, Mount Ebal, near Shechem, modern-day Nablus. A stunning discovery from the late Bronze Age. An ancient Israelite description on a folded lead tablet, just about the size of a postage stamp. It contains what is believed by some researchers to be the earliest written reference to God, to our God, Adonai, the one in all the prayers we've been doing today. It's about 3,000 years old, this little reference. And what does this ancient inscription say? Cursed, cursed, cursed. Cursed by God, Yud-He-Vav, Yahweh. You will die cursed. Cursed you will surely die. Cursed by Yud-He-Vav. Cursed, cursed, cursed. I don't make this up. Really? There you go again. You can't help yourself, ancient priestly pundit. Spewing all this negativity, only this time you're bringing God into it. It's so disappointing. I mean, if our prayers today were so filled with anger, we'd probably get better attendance. But it's embarrassing. The oldest mention of God. Couldn't the archaeologists have discovered a love letter, a birthday card, a parking ticket, anything? Why this obsession with curses? Why this instinctive anger? Why did ancient Jerusalem and Samaria have to sound like the bleachers at Fenway Park? Once again, your rabbi from Boston. It's because if you turn to Deuteronomy, that mountain, Mount Ebal, is right there. It's where the ancient ceremony of blessings and curses took place. This inscription, in fact, proves that it really took place and that it took place there. It's right in the Torah. It's amazing. And here's the thing, the blessings were recited too. But they were recited on the other mountain, Mount Gerizim. So in Mount Ebal, we only have half the story, just the bad half. But across the valley, just waiting to be found someday, to be discovered, there's a box of blessings. So there were curses and there were blessings. And the people got to choose. They got to choose what kind of life they would live, a life of blessing or a life of curses. It was in their power. From break glass to break the glass. We've been pelted with curses everywhere we turn, but we can choose blessing. Not even the Supreme Court can take away that choice. The Torah is telling us that. We are the Jewish people. Ours is the brilliance of Psalm 30, exclaiming that weeping may tarry for the night, but joy will come with the dawn. We're the ones who convinced the prophet Bilam, a Moabite, who came to curse us, to bless us instead. In Nehemiah 13, it says, V'yafoch Eloheinu haklala livracha. God turns a curse into a blessing. Precisely. Now, I believe since the Holocaust, God has handed that role over to us. And we're prepared to take on that role. We are committed to never giving in to despair. We taught the world how to turn lemons into lemonade. In fact, we invented lemonade. Since you asked, lemonade is first mentioned in a fragment found in the Cairo Geniza, a treasure trove of medieval documents found in the attic of the Ben Ezra synagogue in Cairo. Egypt so dry that these ancient documents were so well preserved, and remarkably, this was a very valuable excavation. So anyway, food historian Clifford Wright states that the earliest written evidence of lemonade comes from that Geniza collection. He said the trade in lemon juice was quite considerable by 1104, We know from records of the medieval Jewish community in Cairo from the 10th through 13th centuries that bottles of lemon juice were made with lots of sugar and consumed locally and exported. QED. So we figured out how to take lemons and make lemonade. And that makes sense. After all, what is lemonade but a liquefied Hillel sandwich? It's a charoset maror smoothie. So Jews taught the world how to make lemonade, and many centuries earlier, we even brought lemons into our worship. Come back in a couple of weeks on Sukkot and you'll see what I'm talking about. Incidentally, etrogs are not from the lemon family. Lemons are from the etrog family. These bumpy, bitter, and colorful fruits are as sour as all heck, but as bitter as they taste, that's how sweet they smell. The etrog teaches us that we live life in a state of bittersweet, and that is where we are most fully alive. The rabbis considered it to be the ideal fruit. Some said it was the forbidden fruit of the Garden of Eden. And here's another fun fact. The etrog is not indigenous to the land of Israel. Jews discovered etrogs when they were sitting and weeping by the rivers of Babylon in exile and brought them back to adorn their newly rebuilt temple. Out of the bitterness of exile came the seeds, literally, of redemption in Jerusalem. Okay, so Jerusalem is one of the two Jewish centers where I mentioned that we can see so keenly the blessing emerging from within the curse. The other is the place where Hatikva was written, Ukraine. Because of the genocidal war imposed on that nation by Vladimir Putin, Ukraine has truly become the black hole of Europe. Its glorious cities pulverized mercilessly, its citizens slaughtered, innocent people in their homes, at work, shopping, in classrooms. We can sort of relate to some of that. We mourn for all Ukrainians. We support them, and we love them. And for Jews, there's no more tragic place, perhaps excluding Poland, but the borders sort of are mixed. No more tragic place in our history than Ukraine. Massive bloody pogroms, book burnings, forced conversions, time and time again. You know, the Holocaust, of course, we know, but between 1918 and 1921, 100,000 Jews were murdered there. There were killing fields, and just a taste of things to come. 1 million Ukrainian Jews perished in the Holocaust, many in those mass shootings that were the first stages of the final solution. But Ukraine is also where Shalom Aleichem lived and where Tevye complained about his horse. It was the birthplace of Hasidism, the Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev. Some of the leading lights of modern secular Jewish history came from there, like Bialik and Jabotinsky and Ben Gurion and Golda Meir and Natan Sharansky and Shai Agnon, the only Nobel Prize literature winner who wrote primarily in Hebrew. And other Jews were born there, including Vladimir Horowitz, Simon Wiesenthal, Isaac Stern, Alexander Vindman, and, of course, Mila Kunis, who raised $34 million for Ukraine this year. Now that's a friend with benefits. So this country that Putin is trying to destroy is easily among the most cursed places in Jewish history and among the most blessed. And we see both sides. And they've seen it in the same places. We've been reminded of the negative side, the curses at a place like Babi Yar in Kiev, which was one of the first places Putin struck. He deliberately struck at the memory of this Holocaust place. One of the most infamous massacres happened there, and it was hit with missiles. But then there's a place like Korolivka in southwestern Ukraine, Its once thriving Jewish community is lost to time with overturned gravestones in the cemetery there. But in its heyday, it still had controversy. The great false messiah, Jacob Frank, and his heretical movement was born there. But there's a large cave at the outskirts of town that is of great interest to Jews and Ukrainians who aren't Jewish because of its mystical qualities. It has subterranean passages that form the shape of a Hebrew letter Aleph, which is the first letter in the word for curse, Arur, same word for Mount Ebal. And yet the Ukrainians call it the Cave of Optimism. And during the Holocaust, 38 Jews hid in that cave and survived for 344 days to live out the war. Kabbalists believe its subterranean pathways lead directly to the land of Israel. An idea that Shai Agnon, the Nobel Prize winner, who was born just 30 miles away, picked up on in one of his most favorite stories, his fable of the goat. So we can find hope and light in the darkest of places, like Korolivka, but especially in Uman. Uman is right in the middle of Ukraine, halfway from Kiev to Odessa on the main road, and from Donetsk to Lviv, east to west. Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav is buried there, and Rosh Hashanah is traditionally a time of pilgrimage to his grave. Usually tens of thousands visit every year. But on the very first day of the war, Putin targeted Uman. I mean, after all, if you're going after Nazis, what better place to hit than the most sacred spot in the country for Jews? It was not unintentional, I'm sure. And so they recommended, both the Ukrainian and Israeli governments, that Jews do not go there this year because it could easily be targeted again. He wants to strike at the Jewish heart. And yet today, although it's officially closed, Jews are dancing there. Thousands of Jews are dancing there. I don't know if missiles are falling, but Jews are dancing. And they're there because Uman, Nachman, and Rosh Hashanah lie at the very core of the Ukrainian and Jewish refusal to succumb to despair. That sage, that place, and this day come together in a leap of faith that we all must take. Even if Jews are being discouraged from traveling there, this pilgrimage has to happen. And it's happening all over the world. It's happening right here because I'm telling the story. And here is the story. It was the year 5579, 1810. That year, October 1, was Rosh Hashanah. And it was the great sage Nachman of Bratislav's last Rosh Hashanah in this world. And he knew it, although no one wanted to believe it. He wasn't even 40 years old, but he was suffering from tuberculosis. Normally, he would begin preparing his Rosh Hashanah talk the first morning of the holiday. God bless him. Like to wing it, I guess. But he would start speaking late in the afternoon and then go on well into the evening of the second day. But on this Rosh Hashanah, his disease caught up with him and he began coughing up blood. And he was still coughing violently through the day and into the evening, and hundreds of people were waiting in the synagogue, hoping and praying he would come to give his lesson as he had every year. Finally, at last, he arrived, but he was extremely weak. He sat for some time, and then he started in a very low voice. It was against, and this is the contemporaneous descriptions. They talk about how it was against the laws of nature that he would be able to finish. And the crush from the crowd was tremendous that people fainted. Somehow he continued, and he spoke about the future. How the whole world will be filled with the knowledge of God, and all will see that everything is miraculous. The whole of creation will sing a new song of love and kindness. It was his last Rosh Hashanah lesson, his last lesson ever. And near the end of the talk, he lifted up his eyes and said, no matter from where you come from, what city, my followers should return home and say, whoever believes in God should come to Rabbi Nachman on Rosh Hashanah. And that's where the custom began. Now, thank God I don't have tuberculosis. Well, I did just recover from COVID. But I still have one more Rosh Hashanah to go with you, but I can still feel a little bit of what Reb Nachman must have been feeling that day, 212 years ago, pouring every ounce of breath that he had left into one final message. And here the message turned to his secret of happiness. He said, there's an old tradition that there is a certain part of our anatomy, a small bone that rests at the base of the skull. The sages believe that while the rest of the body slowly decomposes after death, this bone does not. And it's from this tiny bone called the luz that resurrection will begin when the Messiah comes. He said it's completely indestructible. There's actually a midrash in the Talmud about it, that Rabbi Joshua ben Hananiah tried to break the luz with an anvil and a hammer. The anvil split and the hammer was smashed to pieces. The dying Nachman then said to his followers, focus on your luz. Focus on that small piece of you that is indestructible, that essence of yourself that no sin or misfortune can erase. Bind yourself to it. Concentrate on it. Allow it to gladden you and make you happy. Then, even if you find yourself in the deepest, darkest pit without the slightest trace of hope or light, still you will always find your way out. Thornton Wilder wrote something similar in our town. He said, we all know there's something eternal. It ain't houses, it ain't names, it ain't earth, it ain't the stars. Everybody knows in their bones that something is eternal. And that something has to do with human beings. There's something way down deep that's eternal about every human being. Yes, there's a little piece of us that is indestructible. There's a spark of divinity, whatever you want to call it. No one can defeat it. Not Putin, not cynicism, not COVID, not death itself. And Reb Nachman implored his followers in that very same town, in that very same Ukrainian town that Putin tried to smash on the first day of his war operation. On Rosh Hashanah, Reb Nachman, as he faced his own death at the cruel age of 40, said, Lo tityaesh, asur lehityaesh. He said, it is forbidden to despair, for there is no such thing as despair. What he actually said in Yiddish was, kein Yush is gor verhandeln. I'm not good with Yiddish. But the chronicler of the speech wrote it in Yiddish. He drew out the words, kein Yush. And the witnesses claim he said those words emphatically, with very amazing and awesome depth, they said, in order to instruct and hint to each person, every person throughout the generations, not to despair under any circumstances, no matter what happens to them. He spoke those words, in other words, not to the people in the room so much, but to generations yet to come. He was speaking to us. He was speaking to the people in Ukraine today, and to Jews around the world, and to the direct descendants of most of the people in that room who would suffer in the Holocaust. And remember, he advised, things can go from the very worst to the very best in just the blink of an eye. He said this from the darkest place, the darkest personal place imaginable. His break glass moment became a break the glass moment. At the darkest time, we must recall that indestructible force is inside each of us. Did I mention that Ukraine has a Jewish president? My bad. Did I mention that Volodymyr Zelensky is undoubtedly one of the great Jewish heroes since Judah Maccabee? Did I mention that they have a Jewish president whose image is already being carved out alongside the great statesmen of our time, Churchill, Mandela, Gandhi, Ben-Gurion, and Zelensky? Just give him the Nobel Prize already. And to top it all off, last week he met Barbra Streisand, whose grandparents came from Ukraine. Did I mention that the country Ukraine, which was the graveyard for over 1 million Jews just a generation ago, now has one of the lowest rates of anti-Semitism in all of Europe? Just 1 week before Putin invaded, the Ukrainian government passed a law criminalizing anti-Semitism. And did I mention that this little, maybe not so little country was forced to take on a giant global superpower in a battle that would determine to a great degree whether the power balance would shift toward democracy or autocracy? And they haven't won yet. But 6 months ago, who would have expected such results? The free world has come together, led by our president and Congress in a bipartisan manner, and the NATO countries too. It is remarkable. And Zelensky and his people have turned Putin's Anschluss into his Afghanistan. And this heroic Jewish Ukrainian would not leave his people. He told the world as the enemy closed in, "This may be the last time you see me alive." How many of you went to sleep that night wondering what would happen before you woke up? And on March 3rd, he called upon the Jewish people to join him in the fight, specifically referring to the Russian missile attacks on Babi Yar and Uman. And Zelensky said, "I am now addressing the Jews of the world. Can you see what's happening? Therefore, it's very important that now millions of Jews around the world won't be silent. Nazism is born in silence. Therefore, shout about the killings of civilians, shout about the killings of Ukrainians, and we have, and we will. We'll all shout. We'll bring each of us a teaspoon of shout to the fight. We understand what this battle is all about. And through it all, we have rediscovered that unbreakable part of all of us that Nachman called the luz. That indestructible source is actually right here, closer than you ever imagined. In chapter 28 of Genesis, Jacob's on his way out of the land after fooling his father into giving him the blessing. You might remember all of that. Seemed like more of a curse, I think, to Jacob. He was very worried. His brother was after him. He stops for the night, uses a stone as a pillow, a stone supporting the back of his head, supporting the base of his skull. That place, that bone, that luz. And he would have his famous dream right there with a ladder going up and down, the angels. And that's the dream where God assures him that no matter how bad things, no matter how accursed the world seems to be, he will return to the land. And he will prevail. Don't give up hope, Jacob. And the name of the place is Luz. Except that when he wakes up, Jacob realizes how sacred this place is and how amazingly special it is, this cornerstone of indestructibility, and he changes the name from Luz to Bethel. You want to access that source of hope and inspiration? That luz bone that can never be destroyed, not by Putin, not by Hitler, not by every anti-Semite in history, not by even our own folly. You don't need to make pilgrimage to Uman on Rosh Hashanah. You don't need to sink into a deep, dark cave in Korolivka, or climb a scalding mountain in Samaria, or wade in cool springs of Jerusalem. You can access it right here. And by here, I don't just mean this sanctuary, though it's nice to be here. It can be accessed through Torah, through learning, through prayer, through tzedakah, through Jewish connection, through converting curse into blessing and hope into action. And in the end, that's how the curse becomes a blessing. As Václav Havel said, hope is not the conviction that something will turn out well, but the certainty that something is worth doing no matter how it turns out. In that way, hope is the luz. Hope is indestructible. Hope is that part of us that can never be snuffed out. We can't avoid the curses. They're part of our world. We couldn't avoid them 30 centuries ago. We can't avoid them today. But we can choose blessing. It is in our control to make that choice. It is in our power. We can forge a better world where AR-15s don't threaten our children in their classrooms or our neighbors at the supermarket. We can defeat the virulent forms of authoritarianism and conspiracy theories that threaten every ounce of goodness and civility that God calls upon us to choose. We can forge a better world for the sick and the feeble and those threatened with hate and discrimination. We can choose to rid our world of pestilence, of pandemic. And we can choose to rid our world of evil dictators who commit genocide on their neighbors and toss missiles on crowded theaters and rape children. Our task is to choose blessing. It is in our control to make that choice. It is in our power. For we know that in the most accursed place in Jewish history, there is a cave of optimism. And Ukraine has a Jewish president, and black holes somehow shine the brightest. The National Library of Israel's Rare Items Collection contains a special booklet of poems and stories written by children in the city of Kharkiv ahead of the Passover holiday, the year 1920. And I've already mentioned how horrible that time was for Jews, but at the same time, in 1920, a group of Jewish school children in Kharkiv composed a booklet of poems written in clear and elegant Hebrew, which was still in its infancy as a revived language. Their nightmares can hold up a mirror to Kharkiv today, a city mainly destroyed, now ground zero of the struggle to defeat the greatest evil of our times. So here's an excerpt from a poem by one of the children, Daniel Prochabmek, called Winter is Over. Winter is over, the cold is gone. The universe is filled with joy. The southerly winds slowly blow, repairing a gloomy soul. Young sun, spring sun, shining in the sky, casting a wealth of light on the earth. The spirit of spring washes over all. The sky has changed, and spring is already seeping into the depths of the soul. Everything is alive, fresh, happy. Everything returns to life. It sure beats Curse the Mayor. We need to take that imaginative leap of faith. In our current Game of Thrones, we need to declare victory for Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the sovereign of sovereigns, over all earthly impostors. Those who live to command have been remanded back toward their borders. Order has been restored. Winter is over. Our break glass moment has become a break the glass moment. And that Torah came to us from Kharkiv, a decimated, liberated city of hope, now the site of Putin's greatest folly. May his name be forever cursed. History has taught us that would-be autocrats who think they have unchecked power will always overstep and stumble into the fatal error of hubris. And nearly always, On the other side, they will be thwarted by the moral courage and humility of the Jew. Putin, who saw the Soviet Union crumble under Sharansky, should have known better than to doubt Zelensky. And in Uman, there are signs of hope, even as it remains officially closed this year. We know the birds will return, for hope is the thing with feathers. Our pain will beget healing. Asur lehityaesh, never give up. Our mourning will turn to dancing, and joy will come with the dawn. Amen. We have a good amount of service left and some real highlights. We're going right back to our Machzor, page 150, one of the Piyutim, one of the great poems that we often have left out, but the cantor is bringing it back to us. And just a little note that the last line is a response line for the congregation.